Hey guys, so I got a pretty interesting video for you guys today about the highest mileage S85 V10s that I've come across. I recently just saw one that has an insane amount of miles for an S85. Like, I almost couldn't believe it. But unfortunately the car is from Copart, so I don't know its history or its maintenance and what it took to reach that mileage. So I'll go over that at the end. We'll go over some fun numbers about that car. But I want all my videos to be informative, so first I'll go over some other higher mileage S85 V10s in which I do know what's been replaced, because I asked the owners what all of you had to do in your ownership to get to this type of mileage. That way you guys can learn something, and if you plan on driving your M5 or M6 over 150,000 miles, you can get an idea of what it takes to get there. So let's dive in and check it out. All right, starting us off here with the lowest high mileage S85 of the video. On Facebook, on the S85 group, shared from Marketplace, there's a 2007 purple M6, kind of cool because it's painted, not wrapped, clocking in at 160,000 miles, 159,000. This guy, he said the previous owner had to do the rod bearings preventively, and then his ownership here had to do the clutch, the flywheel, the throttle actuators, and the alternator. He's been changing his oil every 3,000 miles. However, I will say in the listing, he also has a code for wheel speed sensor, and then quoting the listing here, the ABS does not work. The pump does work, it just won't register the VIN. Maybe my computer's bad, I'm not sure. I've driven it 3 years without the ABS and personally don't miss it. So not too sure what's going on there. I don't know too much about ABS stuff on these cars. I'm all gas, no brakes. I've never had any issues with ABS stuff on my car. However, I will say, after looking it up, ABS stuff for these cars are extremely expensive. So if you're on Turner Motorsports, they're from BMW, a DSC hydraulic unit is $4,300. Yikes. Can I get a big yikes? However, they do have a DSC repair kit, significantly cheaper for $1,500. Still yikes. And then it's weird because ECS Tuning, which I believe bought Turner Motorsports, their DSC hydraulic unit, also from BMW, is a lot cheaper than Turner's, but still $3,600. And of course, you can go the used route on eBay. I saw one for $850. Or I'm sure there's companies, if you send them your module, they can rebuild it. And that may not be the case. Like he said in the listing, the pump does work, so who knows, maybe it's a little bit cheaper. But just to give you an idea there. But either way, 160,000 miles on this pre-LCI M6, really not that bad. Kind of just standard stuff that we've all known about. And I will say, the reason why it's priced so cheaply, and yes, I say cheap, unfortunately, you are not gonna find these cars under 10 grand in perfect condition anymore. 10 or 12 grand, like that's gone. You should actually watch my market update video I've done on these cars, because since COVID, people are realizing these V10s are pretty cool. They're finally getting the recognition. The reason it's priced so cheaply is because a tree unfortunately fell on the driver's side rear. You can see the damage there is pretty significant. However, the seller did say in the listing that he supplies all the parts to get it fixed. So, not bad. All right, the next one, jumping over to Instagram, straight flexing. Mr. John James posted a story not too long ago, and I saw the dash reading. I'm like, man, how many miles does that say? It said 177,000 miles. So I had to jump in his DMs and ask him, dude, what all have you had to replace? And quote, man, you name it. Full front suspension, SMG unit / pump, the clutch twice, bearings, obvious, all actuators, purge valves, vanos, rotors, belts, pulleys, and he did the injectors and the fuel pump preventively because his friend had brand new injectors and he wrecked it, so he gave him the injectors. Some of that stuff, obviously the rotors and the rod bearings by now we all know is preventative maintenance. But some of this other stuff, yeah, the full front suspension, you can't forget about that. These cars are heavy, and depending how active the previous owner was, like going through the mountains, or if he tracked it or autocrossed it, things like that, more wear and tear, that stuff does get expensive as well. But for 177,000 miles, not too bad. This car looks really clean. So I was actually kind of surprised. Oh, I will say he also said right now he's got to change the O2 sensors. That's another one. I had to do those on my E92 M3. So that's one of those kind of annoying things. They're not crazy expensive, but it does cause an increased emissions light, and then you can't pass emissions. So another thing to consider there. Another one in the 170K range before we get into the thick, juicier mileage numbers. I actually had experience with this one. I did an exhaust video of this a while back. This kid, I think, had 175,000 miles on his, and he absolutely was thrashing it throughout the entire video. His entire ownership was literally just drifting everywhere, full throttle everywhere. And I think he only had it about 8 months, but I remember being generally impressed as to just how much abuse that car took with such little complaints. I think the only thing he had to worry about was the diff leaking, which is a common thing. The input shaft seal, I've had to replace mine at 90,000 miles. I had to replace it on my E92 M3, my E46 M3. These M cars, they just start leaking from the diff seal after a while. It's pretty common. I will say, he said the previous owner replaced the engine. However, there was zero proof of that, and he bought this M5 for very cheap, and the exterior was in rough shape. The paint wasn't in the best condition. You can kind of just tell this car had a rough life. So that makes me think that, yeah, that engine was never replaced, and that guy was just saying that to help get rid of it. Because who's gonna drop, you know, over 10 grand into a car and then not document at all? Not having an invoice, not even a picture or video to help sell it. And second, why would you put that much money into a shell or a body that just isn't in the best shape? Usually when a bearing goes, a lot of these M5, M6 owners end up just parting it out because you end up making more money that way than you would dropping 8 grand on a used S85, and then I don't know how much shop labor to put it in the car. You lose a lot of money that way. You actually make more literally parting it out. It's kind of sad. So it's safe to say that that was 175,000 original miles. Who knows what was done before? But like I said, the car was in rough shape, but that thing pulled like a freight train. That car was a beast of a car, and it sounded amazing. And now for the juicy part of the video. We're gonna jump up in mileage here by a good bit. Yeah, not the highest. After this car, I'll go over the Copart car, but this is the most informative part of the video. Thanks to Troy Jeups for posting this on m5board.com back in 2014. A peek inside the world's highest mileage, all original S85. I'll link this in the description. That way you can read through the comments and pictures. It's a good read, but I'm just gonna skim through it just to keep the video shorter. Troy Jeups is one of the best S85 engine builders in the world. Very well known. He builds the 5.5 liter stroker kits, the 5.7 liter stroker kits, and the 6 liter kits. Does great work. So just to skim through, this M5 starts at the BMW dealer who diagnosed the issue as a Vanos pressure line failure, even though the engine was not in limp mode. Then it gets towed to Troy Jeups. Troy Jeups gets a hold of it. Turns out that it ended up just being 5 spun bearings at once. This is a crazy failure to have, but the motor was still running okay because the rod bolts were stretched and the ID of the connecting rods were all oblong. So the bearing just spun essentially freely for a while and then finally grabbed on, in his opinion. This is an all original motor that never had actuators, never had the Vanos unit serviced, never even had the valve covers off. Can I get an amen? At 261,000 miles. Mic drop. 261,000 original miles. Okay, this is the video that all these people talking about, oh, the car, they blow up before 100,000 miles. This is the video they need to suck on. They need to be reading this m5board.com, but unfortunately those type of people don't care. Whatever, as long as we know our cars can make it that long, okay? How could this possibly be? In my honest opinion, Troy Jeups says, I hear this from my engine shop who has 30 years of engine building knowledge, and I tell all my customers, keep up on the lube change and beat the hell out of the car. In my opinion, an oil change every 5,000 miles and giving your car a workout every day to keep the carbon buildup to a minimum will prolong the life of the engine. And another crazy thing is, the SMG transmission was original. The only thing replaced was the pump at 195,000 miles. So very impressive stuff here. This should be a feel-good type vibe for everybody that owns an M5 or an M6. However, what's even crazier is this E64 M6 that popped up on Copart. Now keep in mind, anything over 200,000 miles is a lot of miles. Most people do not keep their cars that long. Anything over 250 is starting to get pretty serious. Even for your Toyota and Honda, that's a lot of miles. And anything over 300, now we're talking. This legend who chose to daily drive a 2008 M6, he could have chosen any other car. Literally any other car would have been more efficient. But this icon chose an M6. This M6 hit its fate and it clocked out at I need a drum roll. Make some noise. Guys, leave some comments about the highest mileage M5 M6s you've seen. I need the anticipation to build up. Give me some drums.
333,000 miles.
Guys, that is over 500,000 kilometers. That is crazy for a V10 S85. Like, You don't hear about that. How often do you even see that on a normal car? So just for some fun numbers, all right? The average person drives 12 to 15,000 miles a year. This guy doubled that. And keep in mind, the average person drives an average car. So a Camry, Accord. So the average M5 owner, safe to say, is probably driving half of that. So this guy's out here quadrupling what we're doing with our M5s and M6s. Driving 24,000 miles a year. Now, what does that mean for fuel? So the M6 gets about 17 miles per gallon on the highway, and I believe about 11 in the city. But obviously these are mostly highway miles. So we'll just say maybe 15 miles per gallon on average between these 333,000 miles. Now, American fuel, I know is significantly cheaper than European fuel, but still we've had some gas price hikes back in 08, 09, and then recently this past summer under different presidents and stuff, it was really low and then really high. We'll just say for premium fuel, an average of $3.75 a gallon. That would make it, at 15 miles per gallon, $83,000 spent in fuel during this time period. Now that's $500 a month just in fuel. That is a nice car payment. Now, what about oil? So as most of you know, these cars do consume a good bit of oil between oil changes, sometimes as little as every 1,000 miles or sometimes 1,500. But because these are highway miles, his RPMs weren't jumping up and down, he probably wasn't ringing it out, he just stayed at a steady RPM. We'll just say every 2,000 miles he had to add a liter. And we'll say an average liter, 10W60 Locomolle, was about $15. That'd be 166 liters added between oil changes, for a total of $2,500 in additional oil, not including oil changes. So $2,500 doesn't sound like a lot, but then you factor in the actual oil changes, which say he did them every 5,000 miles. That's 66 oil changes at, we'll say, $200 each on average. Obviously it's more if you go to the dealer, obviously it's less if you do it yourself. But $200, even number, that's over $13,000 spent just in oil changes. Now that $13,000 plus the $2,500, this guy spent almost $16,000 just in oil. Now you take that oil and then you add it to the fuel cost. This guy spent nearly $100,000 just in fuel and oil. No other liquids. Spent nearly MSRP just on those. Doesn't include differential oil and transmission fluid, SMG fluid, coolant, brake fluid, tires. I mean, there's a ton of other factors. We could have fun and add some numbers here, but almost MSRP. The 2008 M6 convertible had $108,000 MSRP. This legend spent $100,000 just in fluids, just to have the car running to get to these 333,000 miles. I would love to shake his hand, and I would love to know what he had to do to get that car to make it that far. Really interesting stuff, and I wish I could shake his hand and just say thank you for choosing the M6. He could have chosen any other car, literally one that gets 20 miles per gallon versus say 15, and he would have saved thousands and thousands of dollars. But this guy chose to do it in style with a V10. And if you drive your M5, M6 a lot, I want to shake your hand as well. I want to say thank you. It's good to see these cars being driven. Obviously, anybody can tuck these cars away and not drive them, but it takes money, it takes balls to drive these cars far, and putting miles on them is something I respect, and it's something I like to see. So I want to say thank you and shake your hand if you've made it this far into the video. As always, I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care, guys.